In this video and a couple of more upcoming videos, we are going to see how to manage global application data. So we have already seen some of the data which is inside our components, which can be handled using use state hook or this.state in class components, right? Apart from that, there can be some data which is application wide, which means that across the components from one page to another page or from one component to another component, we need to persist some data. So that sort of data in memory can be also maintained. So for example, that kind of example can be, let's say, logged in user example, or as some application data example which we want to persist across the pages. Right now we have just now this is a simple application which is a home page, and a couple of more routes are there which are slash user slash some id, so slash user slash 1 slash user slash 2. This is the header which is rendering this whole all the routes for navigation, okay, using React router. Now how to maintain global application data. So there are many popular ways, which is like Redux, MobX. Apart from that, there are some unconventional ways also, which are which is one of my favorites, which is called RxJS behavior subject. But before discussing that, I'll show you a simple way which we have already learned. We have already learned React context, isn't it? And we have seen that in a particular React tree, JSX tree, we can basically pass data from top of the tree to any of the child components. Okay, so for example, starting from here, we know that if we wrap around this some context, and then that context we can use anywhere inside any of the components. So that is one way. However, let me tell you that this is not the preferable way. If some small piece of data like we already discussed some sort of theme or something, for that sort of data it is fine. But for any sort of data which is too frequently updated, too frequently used, and it is somewhat larger in size, using context for global data is not recommended. The better solution will be using specific applications which are in particular helpful for that, like Redux or RxJS, which we'll discuss in the next videos. But in this video, I'll just show you simply using React context as a global data store. Okay, so let's start. In home page, we have something like this, right? So let's say we want to store some sort of data which is like, let's say some counter is there. Okay, so some counter is there, and let's say its value is something which we want to display. We'll also have some way to update this value using some way. Okay, so we'll see that how to do that. So first of all, we want some counter. So let's simply firstly create some context. We'll create in a separate file called let's say context.js. In this we will import React from React, and we'll export some context. Let's say app context is equal to export const. This is a variable, and what is the syntax for context? We already know this, react.create context. Okay, and we will start with some initial data. So I'll tell you the data which we are trying to do have something like this. There is a counter data. Okay, and maybe that we can have multiple piece of data. Okay, so let's say counter is there's a like object. In that object, counter is one of the values, and we can extend it by having another piece of data also here, right? That is fine. But the counter is one of the data which we are interested in here. Let's start the counter with 0. Okay, so let's say the initial data is something like, so anyways, this thing is not initial data. Actually we already know that this is default data, which means that if nothing is in the hierarchy of the JSX elements, if nowhere this thing is found, nowhere app context is found, then this will be used, right? However, we are going to definitely initialize it with something, okay, which means that here in the, let's say, app, let's go to root only, okay, here only we will import app context from context, and then we will wrap our whole application around this piece of data, which is dot provider, okay, and we already know that we can wrap everything around it, okay, and then we know that there is some value which is being passed, right? And what is the value which we want to pass? So we can see that we are interested in counter, right? So let's start here also with counter 0. So what we already know, what is the difference between this and this? Here we could pass 10 also. So 10 is the initial value which is passed to everything, right? But anywhere if there is a consumer and there is no provider, then this default value of 0 will be used. But this will never occur in our application because the whole application itself is wrapped around this provider. So now we have app context, inside app context we have this counter value, okay. Now what we want to do is that we want to have the consumption mechanism, okay. So we have already learned many ways, context type, we have learned the context app context dot consumer. We have also learned use context, okay. So we will use a very simple way, which is like use context, okay. So what we will do is that import from React, and we are going to import use context, okay. And what are we going to which context we are going to deal with right now? App context, okay. So from context we are interested in this app context, and then we are going to have our context, which is app context, from this use context, which is initialized with app context, okay. Now we have this thing, so whatever the thing is initialized with, sorry, the thing is initialized with this counter 10, so we can destructure this here, okay. So we can destructure this, sorry, we can restructure this, and then this counter is available for us to use it. And now you'll see that this counter 10 is available here on the home page. And the thing is that this you could use anywhere. So right now if you go on user 1, user 2, then here this component is not used, right? But you can very well take this same thing and apply it anywhere else also. For on user component also you could very well use the same logic, where you can extract this piece of information and then you can use it as you like. So let's use the same div with something like this, okay. So now you'll see that just you need to import use context also. So let's import it, okay, and we will see that now on user pages also this thing is available. So my point of saying is that this data which is available is globally available everywhere. So in here, if it is instead of 10 it is 20, then you can see that everywhere now this data is 20, and not only static data, even if it is 10 and we change it to, let's say, I don't know, 11, 12, whatever we increment or decrement, that also is available everywhere. So let's take an example of that also. So our application data is counter. Now let's say we want to modify this, okay. Now our purpose is that even if we modify from one place, it should be available in other component, application wide, the whole application wide, that updated data should be available. That is our purpose, right? So what we can do is that we can straight away create some functions. So let's create a function increment. You can write increment counter or simple incr, which is like increment. What it does is that it will take the it will take the value, okay, and it will update it, okay. So we have to somehow update the counter value. But the thing is that for that we need to have some state and then update it here. So it's better to have this thing inside some component where we can use state, okay. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to move this inside a component, and the best way is the nearest component is this app. I'll move this to app for now, okay. So let's remove it from here. Let's keep other things as it is. We'll go inside app and we'll wrap everything inside this thing, okay. So let's move everything inside, okay. That is fine. However, now the thing is that this app context we have to import, okay. So we know that this app context will no more be here, and we can use it from here, okay. Now the thing is that this thing is available, but we want this to be dynamic. So what we are going to do is that we are going to have a state which is let's say counter set set counter, and then this is essentially a state. So use state, and its value will start from, let's say, 10. So earlier 10 was hard coded. Now this is a state variable which is initialized with this value 10. That is fine. So till now we have not changed anything. Till now it should work out of the box. So whatever was earlier, it was working in the same fashion. It should work right now also, right? The difference is that now whatever it was 10 initialized with 10 or 20 every time, it is a global data. But what we want is that rather than hard coding it, we want it to update it somehow, okay. So as I mentioned, we can also have incr something like this, like that a particular this is a function, or you can properly write incr counter or something, okay, which means that I'm trying to increment counter, okay. And for that I can have a separate function incr counter, and what it does essentially is that it increments the counter. So essentially it takes the current count value and increments it by 1, as simple as that, right? And now we have already seen this in context example when we were learning context, that now like counter, this incr counter will be available wherever we want, but there we can call, but this thing is defined here. So from wherever we want we can call. Essentially this thing is going to be called where it is defined. It is defined here, so this set counter will be corresponding to this and counter will be updated, okay. So that we can see in action by using this incr counter at a place let's say inside home only, okay. So here let's have incr counter, and then I have a button, okay. And in button I say that let's say increment counter, okay. And then on click I will call that. So now you'll see that I have a counter value of 10 right now. When I increment, it becomes 11, 12, and the same exact thing I can repeat for decrement counter also, right? So the same logic I can do it for decrement also. So instead of increment, it will be decrement. Rest everything will be same. One more thing, one slight nuance, that all these increment counter, decrement counter, it's a good practice to update the actual context also. Okay, so here there should be so right now, earlier there was just one value counter, but it's a good practice to write everything default value also. And what is the default value? Let's just have an empty function, so that just the program doesn't crash in case it is not available. Other than that, it's fine. incr, okay. So it's empty function. This is just a fallback. Okay, now we have passed decrement counter, so exactly the same way we can use it in home, and again we can use it in any component. I'm just using it in home. You could have used in other components also, like user component, and then destructure it from the context itself. And now you can see that when I want to decrement, then I can decrement. When I want to increment, then I can increment. And if I have incremented, then 13, then this 13 is everywhere. You can see that everywhere it is 13. Okay. If I have decremented to, let's say 9, then now you can see that in everywhere it is 9, which means that application wide this value is being updated everywhere. It is the same value. Okay. And then so this is the way in which you can use. In fact, if you want to use multiple contexts, so for example, let's say you want to have some user data also, that sort of, so you can create a new context. Instead of this, you can have, let's say, export const, let's say some user context. Okay, and then you can have let's say react.create context, and let's say this thing is null. Initially, let's say the user is not logged in React. Okay, initially the user is not logged in, so the user context is null. But when the user is logged in, then you can have something like this thing is some username, you're setting something. Okay, so in the same manner, what you can do is that inside app where we are doing other things, okay, I can have a user context also. Okay, and then I can do something like let's say I can also have another provider here. So like I have app context.provider, I can also wrap it around user context.provider. So this is the example of multiple providers, isn't it? Okay, and then I can have a value of initial value of null, but rather than hard coding null, what I can do is that I can have user value. So I can have const user set user is equal to use state, and let's initialize it with null. Initially the user is null, and then I can use this value here, and I can have some sort of let's say functions like let's say login, logout, that sort of functionality. So I'm just giving, so login will be definitely a full-fledged application, but let's say when you click this function, then you set your user to something. So let's say the logged in user is Alex. Okay, so you set the user to Alex, and when you do logout, then you reset it back to null. So logout is equal to, you will reset it back to null. Just plain and simple. Actually, this sort of thing will be done inside the login application, right? And then you can take this login and logout functionality and you can implement it. So right now, let's say rather than having a single value, let's have here also a JSON where user is there and then login is there and then logout is there. Okay, so login and logout. Okay, and then let's update the context in the same manner. So here, rather than having a single value, let's have it something like user, which is null, and then we'll have login and logout both has just plain empty functions. Okay, fine. Now once we do this, then user context is available wherever we want, right? So let's say this time let's say in home page also we can add, but let's say this time we are adding in user application. Okay, user component. So in user component you can have this sort of thing, user context. Okay, so apart from app context, you can have user context, and then you can have something like this, const user is equal to use context, and then you're having user context, and then you can clearly see that what is the user, and that doesn't matter here, you can use that anywhere. So what we can do is that user, okay, and now obviously for the first time this thing will be null, and that's why it will not be rendered. But what we can do is that we can have some sort of login logout functionality. So rather than having this, let's also have a button, and in that let's have a login and logout functionality. Okay, and what happens is that in login and logout everywhere, let's have a login and logout function. And what is this login logout? Essentially it can be destructured from here only. Okay, so now you'll see that when I click on login, then it is Alex, and logout, then it is again logged out. And this thing you can, since this thing is a global data, you can use it anywhere. Okay, so let's say here I'm not using this at all. Okay, let's say I'm directly using this in header. So in header I can have, and more importantly I can have one small thing that let's show you that thing. So I can have something like this, that login is there, and if it is logged in, then only logout button should be there. Otherwise if it is logged down, then only login button should be there, right? So for that I can write a simple thing here, that if user is there, right, then you better show logout, otherwise you show login. So if user is there, then you better show logout, okay, and otherwise you show login. Fine. So you can see that now user is not logged in, so login, and then when user is logged in, then I can only show logout. And now let's remove this, this is no more needed. I can use this sort of thing inside let's say header also. So let's say in header I have a plain and simple component where I can do something like this, the same thing. So these two things maybe I'll need there. Okay, and then I'll take the use context, and I'll not use app context here, I'll just need user context. Okay, so in this case I can use const user is equal to const user is equal to use context, and then user context. Okay, and then I can print this somewhere. Okay, so let's print it here, let's say like this. Okay, and this can't resolve, so I believe this path is incorrect. So let's see, I don't know, dot slash context. So I think that will be a better thing. So yeah, and this thing is, you can see that when I log in, then Alex is there, and when I log out, then Alex is not there. So when I log in, it's there, and then we can properly style it something like this, that I can also keep it inside nav, and I can have the same sort of styling which is already existing. So let's say let's keep it inside ULLI only, and let's keep it here, and let's have another thing which is, let's say it will be like logout button or login button. Okay, but anyways, let's not complicate. We can, you understand that like logout login button is here, we can keep it here also, right? But let's simply put the user, that's it. So we can simply have it like this, and then we can see that it is working fine. but we don't want this below this, rather we want this horizontally aligned. So for that, what we can do is that on the on this header itself, what we can do is that we can do display flex. Now it will be horizontal, and then I want to justify it so that they are stretched. So for and there is a gap in between. For that, I can write justify content and space in space between. That will evenly spread it, and there will be space in between. So now we have it, and now it will be simple. Like if you log in, then you can write it something like this, that something like this, that if user is there, then print something like hello. I don't know, like let's keep it in a template literal. Hello user, otherwise I'll print nothing. Okay, so something like this, isn't it? So hello Alex is there, and once it is logged out, then it is not there. So once I am logged in, then hello Alex is there. And wherever you go inside till the time, if you whatever the values you are changing, you can see that counter value and Alex value, wherever you are there, it is same. Okay, and from wherever you change, so I'm changing it from user component, but in some other component application wide, since this is available, so you can see that here this thing user is gone. So now you have a fairly good idea that how what is global data and how to use global data application wide. It's just that in this video we just learned it using a normal context React context way, but in production grade applications with data which is frequently changing, and data which is non-trivial and substantial in size, context is not the way to go. Okay, in fact React team itself does not recommend it. Okay, so what we will do is that in the next video we'll see the way which most of the applications widely use it, which is called Redux. And after that, in the next to next video, I'll discuss the RxJX way of doing that, which is like my personal favorite. Okay, so yeah, so we'll finish this video for now. Let's see you in the next one.